Health podcast, the podcast that brings you a complete view of everything healthcare, exercise as medicine, and a lot more.
We're your hosts, Helen O'Leary and Reece Noble, physiotherapists at Complete Physio and Pilates in London.
This is episode 1, where we sit down with Complete Physio Director Chris Myers and talk about the origins and ethos of Complete Physio.
We also get Helen, who happens to be the Director of Complete Pilates. We get her insights into how Complete Pilates got started and how the two companies work and thrive together.
This is the first part of a 3-part chat with Chris, so keep an eye out over the next couple of weeks to hear him share his knowledge and expertise on diagnostic ultrasound and also the treatment of Achilles tendons.
It's very exciting for us both to, 1, get this podcast started, and 2, to share with you all why we do what we do. We hope you enjoy listening as much as we've enjoyed recording. All right, we're live. All right, so today for our first Complete Health podcast, which is very exciting, we have Clinical Director of Complete Physio, Chris Myers, here along with us. We're going to have a good chat to Chris. His knowledge and expertise is quite wide-spanning, so we're going to try and hit on a few of his favourite topics today.
Could be here
the first one being himself. But certainly the first one, and to push us off, we're actually going to have a chat about the origins of Complete and sort of the driving thoughts and thinking behind both Complete Physio and Complete Pilates. So for those of you that don't know, my co-host Helen O'Leary is actually the Clinical Director of Complete Pilates.
Hello.
And while the two companies are sister companies, they do operate separately from each other in many ways. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about that, and just to get the origins and the why behind why it all happens. So thank you both for being here.
Thanks for inviting us, Reece.
Absolute pleasure. So Chris, I guess just before we do kick off and get into the hard hitting questions, just a elevator sell of yourself.
So I'm Chris Myers, Clinical Director of Complete Physio. I am a physiotherapist. I'm also an osteopath and musculoskeletal sonographer, which we'll go on to what that is later. Been running Complete with Dave Baker and Dave Luca for around 10 years. And we're going from strength to strength. We've operating now in 6 different sites. We've got about 20 different physios with lots of different expertise. We see lots of patients every week and we try and get everybody better.
Excellent, fantastic. And while we are talking about the origins of things and the meaning, Helen, Complete Pilates?
Yeah, so we kicked off about 5 years ago now.
Okay.
I met Chris just before that and realised, because I wanted to kind of make people active straight away. My background's sports. And sort of immediately as someone kind of comes off in an injury, they want to be active, they want to stay as fit as possible. So I wanted a different way of people being treated rather than feeling like they're going to come in and lie on a bed. They wanted to come in and move immediately. And sometimes you have to fight people to get in the gym, but if they have the expectation that that's what they're going to do, then that's kind of what I wanted to do, so that the responsibility lay on the individual instead. So we started in Chelsea and then sort of developed from there.
Spread out from there.
Spread from there.
Fantastic. So, Chris, obviously you mentioned Dave Luca and Dave Baker there. This is going to be a bit of a learning experience for me, this podcast, because I don't actually know a lot of this story. So how do you actually know Dave and Dave?
Good question. So I met Dave Baker. We were both working as extended scope physiotherapists in an East London NHS trust. And Dave had actually set up a private clinic with 3 other guys, of which Dave Luca wasn't actually one at the time. And then things developed and evolved as they do. And it ended up with myself, Dave Luca. We actually met Dave Luca through Dave trained with Dave. There's a lot of Daves.
There is Dave.
My middle name's Dave. Well, it's David. And so we met Dave Luca. He was actually running a clinic on his own in the city, and we sort of amalgamated that clinic with what at the time was Kentish Town Physiotherapy Clinic into Complete Physio. And so now it's the 3 of us running Complete Physio.
Fantastic. All right. And then I guess obviously the 3 of you, well, I hope, had some shared ideas, shared visions,
definitely.
which formed the why and the driving force behind Complete Physio. So what were they? What were those ideas? And I hope they're continuing on to today, really.
Yeah, well, we try.
How many years has it been? So
10 years it started.
It's been 10 years for like the last 4 years. So I think it's more like 13, 14.
We actually had a 10-year party about 2 years ago.
Which we realised it was 12.
But it's really weird because the journey, it's been quite a long journey. But myself and Dave particularly were extended scope physiotherapists up till, so working in the NHS up to about 6 or 7 years ago. Well, in fact, Dave he finally left the NHS about 4 or 5 years ago. That's Dave Baker. So the private practice initially was just something that gave us a bit of flexibility to see clients that wanted to see us privately, and then the NHS was very much our focus, and we got a lot of what we call our extended skills there, so what we'll talk about later in terms of the diagnostic ultrasound and the ultrasound guided injections. And so we went through those training pathways in the NHS, and then over time we sort of dropped one day every 6 months at the NHS, and then in the end went full-time private. So I feel like it's been a sort of full-time job for me for about 5 or 6 years. So Complete Physio's been sort of developing sort of relatively rapidly for the last 5 to 6 years. In terms of why we set it up, we thought there was an opportunity for this extended role that we were doing in the NHS in private practice, particularly, as I said, with the diagnostic ultrasound and the guided injections. And also, and for the physios out there, I think they'll understand, physio, particularly with medical insurance, has changed a lot. So it was essentially becoming a bit of a race to the bottom in terms of whoever people would get contracts depending on what their price was rather than their quality. Right. And we made a decision just to stick with quality, basically. And I think that's working well for us. And so I'd like to think that we have maintained that sort of high quality throughout. I think we're developing all the time as a clinic and getting better at what we do, and attracting better and better staff like yourself, Reece. I have to say that. And so so it really does come down to providing a quality service, but around that having a friendly clinic where people enjoy coming to, both staff and patients. And really try to push the boundaries of physio and what physiotherapy can do, because physiotherapists in this country have a very wide scope of practice in terms of diagnostics and in terms of intervention. Particularly myself and Dave, who have a background as what's called an extended scope physiotherapist, we're very passionate that physiotherapists, because we think we're in a great position to provide expert care, and a lot of the training that we have as physios allows us to develop different skills, as I say, particularly in this country where we have a sort of a large scope of practice.
Yeah, and physio, it's interesting. I've had conversations with people about when people ask you, what do you do? I'm a physio. Well, now, that can mean 100 different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really interesting to see how it's spread out across the board.
I think it's really exciting to be a physio at the moment, particularly at Complete Physio, because we don't, and I'm quite happy to say this, whereas a lot of other private practices in London, they wouldn't push that extended role of physio. And I think if you're pushing yourself for an extended role, then you're developing knowledge, you're going on lots of different courses, and you're sort of trying to push yourself, and eventually in fact, as you go along, it's going to ensure that patients are getting sort of expert care over and above. This is probably the key thing with Complete Physio, is I'd like to think that they're getting care over and above what they would get at or equal to other clinics. Yeah. Don't want to slag off other clinics. Yeah. But I do think that we don't limit the scope of practice. Yes. And the other thing is, we have lots of, as a physiotherapist, as you said, you might go down the diagnostic route, you might go down the Pilates route like Helen and the guys do, or with yourself you go down that strength and conditioning and rehab route. And I think I've been doing physio for 20 years, and it's very important that you match the patient up with the therapist. And I'm sure patients that are listening to have had physios where they've just clicked with them and they've got the right skill set for their problem. For sure. And that's really important for us. So we have a wide spectrum of experience in our physios, from working in elite sport, or working in chronic pain, or working in rehabilitation, or working in Pilates, working in circuses like Helen did. So I think that's really important, and it's interesting when you look at the website, the most visited page on the website by far is the Meet the Team. So patients are looking for the right physio for their specific problem, and I think we've sort of encouraged that throughout the development of Complete, and I think we're in a good position with it now.
Yeah, and I think one of the things as well is that we both try and encourage and get the therapist to say what they like and you know, actually work more and more and more with what they like. You know, you can't just be a rehab therapist. There's a million different things in rehab. Are you high end? Are you that real kind of strength and conditioning? Are you the very basic kind of Pilates side? You know, lots of different things give you lots of kind of different aspects. It's not, you know, Pilates isn't going to get you to start playing elite sport again. So I think one of the things that's really nice about the clinic is that everybody within physio can say, well, I'm this kind of physio and I love this sort of thing. And that's what the companies really try and help develop and try and change within people, rather than just say you're a physio, which means you have to do everything and anything, even if you really hate it.
Yeah, develop specialisms. Yeah. Because you can't be great at everything. No. You can't be the best shoulder physio, the best ankle physio. No. I mean, we try, but you know, you're going to develop expertise in certain areas, and it might be related to your own personal experience. So in your case, Reece, as a cricketer, pretty average cricketer I hear, but
very average.
But or we've got Stephen Garvey, who's a GB duathlon, you know, or we've got, you know, Jared, who works in the NBA for part of the year. And so if you're a patient that is a basketball player or a cricket player, then you know you're going to want to match up potentially with that physio that has experience in the area, and that's really important. Yeah. I'm a very good marathon runner, so I see lots of
He's just about made 5k.
I've done the London Marathon once. Yeah. But I think that's really important, and we get, you know, as somebody that runs it, I speak to patients all the time who are interested in matching up with the right physio, and that's really important. Yeah. The worst thing a patient can do is come to Complete Physio or Complete Pilates and waste their money. Yeah. That doesn't mean we get everybody better, but they need to get the right therapist for their problem and get value for money, which I think we are. And we very much have that thing that if people aren't getting better in 3 sessions, then we need to reassess what's going on. It's, you know, most people, I can tell you, do get better in 3 sessions, but we don't want to be that physio practice that sees people, they come in, we do the same thing with them, and essentially we're not listening to them and they're not getting better.
Yeah, not progressing along.
And that's reflected in all of our practitioners, I think. Yeah. So I think all of our practitioners have got a real thirst for their own career, and I think if you've got a thirst for your own career, then that will reflect in the way that you treat your patients.
Yeah, and always wanting to get people better, that working towards the person's goals and pushing them towards that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think one of the characteristics as well is that within the staff and within the team is that we're not afraid of asking other people for help. So if we think that we've seen someone we're not the right person for them, or we're not quite sure on the diagnosis or something like that, there will be someone within the team who will be able to help you. So kind of stepping up and going, this is what I think, but I'm not sure, and then kind of getting help from
and the wider team as well. So like it might be that we work very closely with sports doctors, orthopedic surgeons, and
other physios.
And other physios, yeah. And we always say there will be patients you can't get better, but if you can't get them better, you need to know somebody that can.
Person who can.
Yeah, exactly. And patients thank you just as much for referring you to the right person as actually getting them better yourself. So I think that's really important. And we've all been doing private practice in London a long time. So, you know, we do have a good black book of the best surgeons and the best sports docs and the best other physios, you know, with specialist areas that we can call upon.
Yeah, and that's definitely important because, even just in-house, the amount of people send over to Claire Pacey, who's a fantastic women's health physio, not my wheelhouse, not at all. So, but I just have that base knowledge of understanding when I see something to be like, I think this is something women's health related. And then, Jane Baker, who shares a room with the feet, all these. It's just good to have that complete care to offer people. So it's
it's a tough job. I think we have a really tough job. It's not as if every patient is different, every patient's story is different, every patient's goal is different. And so we're trying to relate the principles that we know to that individual. Yeah. And it's not, we like to call it a science, but there's actually a bit of an art to it as well. So there's no way you're going to get every patient better that walks in. But as a team, as a complete team, which sounds good, we need to make sure that we are, we need to make sure that we've got the in-house experience, but also the contacts outside to ensure that patients get the right care.
So, talking about cross referral, Chris has stopped talking about himself.
Time to leave waffles.
Helen, so complete. You touched on it before. Complete Pilates about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then, so I guess, what's your background to lead up to that point, and how did you end up with this bloke and the other guys under a similar umbrella?
So my background was sports, and I used to work. So I came straight out of university and went straight into men's rugby, and then went to join the circus. And then
as a physio, not
as a
like,
physio,
not like literally
I
join
wish
the
I
circus.
could do all
Well, not just
the
any
cool
circus,
things.
was it?
So I went to join Cirque du Soleil and then toured with them. And I was on an arena show, so we moved every week for 3 years.
Wow.
And then I came back to London and was sort of working a little bit privately, but sort of didn't really feel like it was for me. I didn't love being in a room not surrounded by people. In sport, you have one room with 4, 5, 6 different people in it, and it's very open treatment. And I didn't like the kind of closed door feel that I was getting, so ran away to the circus again. Came back to London for a short stint and had a birthday party with a girl that I've known for a very long time, Louise Orwin, who's also one of the physios at Complete.
Yep.
And one of the physios who was working for Chris at the time was there, and so we were sort of speaking about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to make things a little bit more active and go down more of the Pilates biomechanics route. So he put me in touch with Chris, and that's pretty much the rest of it. I met him at Chelsea one lovely sunny March morning, quickly went back to Japan, and then came home and started up in Chelsea.
Great.
So I got into Pilates in rugby, and we used to have a physio that came in who, it was amazing. She would see all of our first team players, so any of the kind of high value players that we wanted as our starting 15. And quite a lot of the time, these boys who we would be treating all week with soft tissue, with acupuncture, with hands-on, with rehab, with strength and conditioning, with everything you could imagine, she'd come in, she'd chuck them on these machines, and then all of a sudden for the next 2 days their backs felt better. And so then they'd kind of do their own little things, and they'd spend 20 minutes here, half an hour there, and they'd have to do it a certain number of times a week. And it just baffled me that we were working this hard and she was sort of sitting there not doing very much. But these guys were actually feeling so much better.
Yeah.
And it meant that we could load them more and we could do other things with them. So I kind of got into it, and she was an amazing woman. Her husband was actually the England physio at the time. And she'd been doing Pilates, pulsar Pilates for a very long time. So I went and took the course and then kind of got more into it in rugby. Took it with me to the circus. They carried reformers and things with them as well. So I use it a lot for prevention, and a lot of athletes have chronic injuries that it's a lot about maintaining them. They don't start a season at 100%. They won't finish a season at 100% fit. You're kind of, if you can finish them at around 60 to 80, then you're doing really, really well. Yeah, and in Cirque, we do up to 10 shows a week in 5 days on an arena show. So you might have a 2-show Friday, 3-show Saturday, 2-show Sunday. And you do that for sort of 10, sometimes 13 weeks, and then you get a 2-week break. So the body goes through a lot when they're having to repetitively do the same thing in terms of the shows, but also the training load as well. So I sort of used it with that, and then really realised that I liked... There was sort of one defining moment when I was sort of in that room in private practice where this sort of guy walked in, and as I was talking to him, he was already starting to lie face down on the bed because he had no interest of going into the gym and actually changing anything.
Every physio's seen that before.
And I was just like, I just don't think I can do this. So I kind of decided I wanted to do it the other way. And when I spoke to Chris about this, he got quite excited, and he thought that there was a real role for it because, one of the biggest things is that Pilates is amazing for certain things. If you guys are struggling to get knee range, then the reformers can help you with that really easily. And so there's that really nice crossover for a lot of backs, and to load people who need partial weight bearing and just need to kind of slightly tweak their mechanics in terms of how they're loading to try and offload those areas. The equipment's amazing for that, but it can't load you. So that's where, the Pilates side can give you the mechanics, can give you the initial introduction so that you can then go and load further with a strength and conditioner or in the gym or with one of the physios, something like that. And so we realised that there was a really, really nice crossover between the two.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it started and why it started.
Yeah, it's good to know that, because that really fits in with, I guess, my philosophy on physiotherapy as well, and that continuum of care, which we're going to get onto soon. But coming from my sort of strength and conditioning background, where it's, you know, load, heavy, push heavy things, but then you see people that can't posterior pelvic tilt, or they can't control them, they can't do a standing scooter, they can't stand on one leg, they just don't have that pelvic control, so they can back squat 200 kilos, but get them on one leg, and they're horrible. So it's interesting, that fits in perfectly, you know, saying where you started in rugby, and just that great continuum of care, and you know, over time you've referred a few over to me, and you know, vice versa, because you can see the gaps where they need to fill, and things like that. And then, as you know, Chris's ultrasound expertise, which we're going to get onto, that then is that other end of the continuum, isn't it? And getting through and going. Yeah, because
you've got to start with that diagnosis, and then you've got to move through the stages of rehab, and ultimately everybody should be loading, whether you're, you know, young or old. You should be adding load that's appropriate for you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you should. I think the other thing as well, I don't know if patients will ever, I don't know who will listen to this, but if patients are listening to it and they're struggling with back pain, that whole thing that you said there, Helen, about I go to my physio, before you've even chatted, they're lying on their front because they're expecting what we call a passive treatment, so be it a massage, a manipulation or a mobilisation. And I've been a physio 20 years, and over that 20 years I remember learning all these techniques at university, which we still use because they can be very useful, particularly in acute pain. But with people with back pain, if all they're doing is getting treatment, lying on their front, or getting a manipulation every week, they are not going to make the lifestyle changes, and more importantly the behavioural changes, to actually get their back better long term. And certainly before the Pilates, we were probably doing too much of that. And actually now with the Pilates and bringing people like yourself in that have that strength and conditioning, rehab and gym background, I think we are providing more of a complete sort of care for that patient. And as I said, you've got to have people that have got the passion. I've got passion for certain things. Helen's got the passion for the sort of getting those chronic low backs better. But without that Pilates and with you as well from a rehab point of view, you know, you're not going to get a lot of those patients better. So now we've got that as well, we can provide what's best again for that specific patient. And don't get me wrong, if you've got acute back pain, having a manipulation, lying on your front, having some passive treatments done to your back can be really, really useful. But if you've got, and it could get you out of pain, but if you've got a chronic condition or you've got recurrent episodes of low back pain, then you have to have those active treatments like Pilates, like the gym, and loading it up a bit more.
Addressing those underlying causative factors rather than just putting a band-aid on it all the time and dealing with the symptoms.
Actually, the lockdown's been really interesting. So I've had patients that I know I might have gone a bit more passive with initially, but you know, when you're doing a remote physio session, you can't. It has to be exercise based. So exercise compliance over lockdown has been amazing because patients have had to take responsibility because they can't get the other stuff. And actually, I've had lots of patients that have done really well, and I've started to see them face to face now because they have to comply to their exercises. There is nothing else they can do, and they realise, and we all see this as physios, the patients that do the exercises, generally speaking, are the ones that are more likely to get better. That's without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think a half an hour session is 4% of your day. So if you're doing that twice a week, it's 1% of your week, not even. So it's what you're doing, and you know, enabling those people outside to look after themselves and self-manage, but helping them along the way. And the manual therapy, you know, as physios, we know that it can be super helpful, but it just needs to be backed up with that active rehab where the patient's really taking control of their own outcomes.
And I think what you guys have touched on is another thing that we really try and work on as all of us. It's that education of patients. So making people understand what's going on, why is it happening, how can they actually change things, so that if they do then have that acute episode of back pain, instead of just being, you know, calling their physio, osteo, chiro for manipulation or soft tissue work or whatever it might be, they have the tools in order to go, okay, well, how can I sort of calm this flare up down a little bit quicker myself, which then immediately means, you know, if you're on holiday for 2 weeks and you have a back problem because you just played volleyball with your kid and fallen over, it means that you're more likely to have a decent holiday rather than hate yourself for the rest of the time. And that, I think, is really key as well.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. I think that's a pretty good sort of overview of the two sides of Complete and how they sort of work together. That concludes episode 1 of the Complete Health Podcast. For any further information or queries, please feel free to email into us at either reece@complete-physio.co.uk or helen@complete-pilates.co.uk. We're also on Instagram at Complete Health Podcast, all one word.
Keep an eye out over the next couple of weeks for part 2 and 3 of our chat with Chris, where we're going to talk about some of his passions, including diagnostic ultrasound and also the treatment of Achilles tendon problems.
Stay healthy and goodbye.